Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Coronado, and tonight on the show, we will discuss CF Montreal's first week in training camp, CF Montreal's first press conference with Laurent Courtois and some players, and the Canada women's national team has hired their new coach. All that and a lot more on episode 211 of The Ball is Round. Hello, everyone. I'm joined tonight by my good friend Elias. How are we doing, Elias?
I'm doing all right. CF Montreal is back. We got some press conferences in. It's starting to feel like all is well in the world. We'll see what happens when they kick off, but
We're gonna
at
get
least for now, the vibes are good.
I think get to that, man.
Training camp vibes are always good, more often than not.
Before we start, I just want to let you guys know that Hadi is on vacation, but we know he is watching and listening from afar. So huge shout out to Hadi. Have a drink on us, man, please. We're missing you out here. Elias, I know you already said you're doing good. Tell us a little bit about Barcelona. What's going on there?
How
we feeling?
Champions League starting back up again, so I have that to hope on to. But the league I swear they love making their lives difficult, man. I swear they love making their lives difficult. There's never a dull moment. You win, you score like 16 goals in the last 4 games, and then you only score 1 goal against the team in relegation fight. So you know what?
God, that sounds familiar. That's my Bayern beat Wolfsburg 3-2. Every time I see Bayern versus Wolfsburg, they just go back in time to that time that Robert
5 goals
Lewandowski with the 5 goals. I remember watching that game live, and I was like, "What is happening right now? This complete insanity." Anyways,
could you see that on Saturday? But whatever. None of my business.
Just missing 4. No, did he score any? Just missing.
He didn't score. No.
Well, then missing 5.
Koundé has as many goals in the last 4 games. It's crazy.
Anyway. Marseille 1-1 Strasbourg, and Ismail continues to be on the bench.
Yeah, Cornelius got the start, but
yeah. We always focus on the negative, right? But Kone is a question mark, right? We do want to start seeing him maybe, hopefully, taking the field, be it with Marseille or be it with another team. But anyways, we're not going to talk about that.
Don't let Andy hear you. Don't let Heidi hear you say that.
Heidi, do you hear me? Anyways, as you know, CF Montreal officially started their first week of training camp in Orlando. Elias, first time in a long time that we go into a training camp with what resembles some sort of continuity. How important?
Insane.
How important is that for the young or new players with CF Montreal to have that continuity?
And Joe Waterman kind of talked about it during the presser, and I think he kind of echoed it the best. It's that you're not playing catch up anymore, right? And you're kind of just you're looking to learn now the minutia of what your coach wants, and you can really get into the nitty gritty. And yes, the new players, they've got to learn to this philosophy and this culture, and then also these tactics. But for the large majority of these players, you're just learning and relearning and improving on stuff you've been doing for the last season. So yeah, especially for a youngster who doesn't have to learn new tactics every 10 to 12 months, this is super important for someone like Nathan Saliba, for someone like Jaquil Marshall-Rudy, who can have some continuity now because we know the revolving door at TFC. For all these young players, getting this continuity now for Bryce Duke, Mahala, look, I can name a million young players. We're not going to do that, but it's super important, and especially for also some of the younger players that joined mid-season, right? David Bugay, Caden Clark, who's with the national team now, got an assist and a goal and assist, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So shout out him. But a lot of these players who have had rather tumultuous club careers up until last season, whether it be with different teams or different different coaches, now have this semblance of continuity. And so, yeah, man, this is super important. But the thing is, you can't just be like, we have continuity, cool, and then get complacent. Yeah. Because now is when the real work starts. And that's what Laurent Courtois was talking about at the postmortem last year. He was like, I can't wait for the offseason because that's when the actual the heavy lifting of the growth gets done. So now you got to live up to it.
Look, we talk about continuity, but at the end of the day, how many moving pieces do we have this offseason? I mean, the only continuity, real continuity we had was maybe the sporting, like up top, right? The sporting direction, and we had the head coach and the assistant coach that stayed the same. Um, that's pretty much in the field. Well, we had the some of the pillars of midfield and defense, and of up front, like you said, Bryce Duke and Caden Clark, of having that continuity, right? So I think it's important as well. I think the just last season was, I think Laurent Courtois may have had maybe a week or so to get himself settled in, even in Montreal or even anywhere, just with the team. He
Yeah,
just didn't get
he
that
came
many.
off immediately.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just getting to know each other, while now the line of communication that he probably has with Joel Waterman and Samuel Piet and all these players is completely different, and they can kind of say translate or communicate that to the younger to other players that maybe are used to another kind of have other kind of habits and training with Chicago or New England or wherever it is that they come from, right? Um, but it does seem that this week still we're CF Montreal still with an incomplete squad. Giacomo Vrioni is MIA, to say
He's
that.
no, he's in. He'll get there.
Okay, you think he's
Yeah,
he's
yeah, he's gonna get
going?
there. Like I mean,
Okay, okay. MIA this week. We'll see. We'll see what they say next week. But Kaden Clark and George Campbell with the U.S. national team. This week was mostly dedicated to physical work and setting the basis for the year, but still with no official physical trainer for the team. What do you
huh?
make of this, Elias?
Yeah, I mean, Courtois talked about it a bit. There will be one in due time. I guess they're taking their time to get the right one. God knows that with the amount of non-contact and muscular injuries and knocks and injury setbacks that have been the case for the last 2 or 3 years, um, it's very clear that you want somebody that maybe specializes in that.
Yep.
Maybe the inconsistencies. Maybe someone with a bit more MLS experience. Again, we keep on talking about it, right? MLS experience. You could have all the experience in the world in Europe or in other countries or in other footballing um, environments. If you don't understand the toll that traveling and the weird cycle that your body goes through during an
The
MLS
weather
season,
changes.
the weather changes, the time zone shifts, right? Every week is like a Champions League game where you're going across multiple time zones. If you're going to the West Coast, or even if you're going to teams within your conference, right? An hour can throw it off completely with your if your body's you know so finely tuned and so demanding. An hour change, if it's not properly accounted for, you know, you're not optimal, and they need someone with MLS experience. That's really just the most important thing I find. And it's the same thing with the staff, right? Yeah, there's a bunch of new staff members, but we talked about this. They all speak Laurent Courtois' language, right? And then you take a look at the case of Marco Donadel, it's someone who speaks CF Montreal's language, right? So it's not like there's any new people going like, what is this place?
Yeah.
This is people who are either intimately familiar with the coach and the philosophy or the club. And so I'm not really all too concerned about that. It just sooner rather than later, you know?
I get it. Yeah. I don't know. To me, it's kind of ironic that we're dedicating this week to just physical work, and yet we don't have a physical trainer.
Yeah.
But they've proven in the past 2 years, Elias. I think with the Hernan Losada hiring, maybe they kind of rushed into it. But now they're kind of saying, you know what, guys, regardless of the pressure outside, regardless of what the
Mhm.
expectations are, we're gonna do our due diligence. We're gonna make sure that we're doing the right thing. So yeah, so it's important to I think get that piece right, because I don't want to blame it on our past physical trainer, but there have been kind of worrisome injuries that may have been just coincidental, physical, or maybe they had to do, like you said, with the traveling and maybe not the proper recovery, right? Because in, I think, the month of May, April, we had consecutive weeks of, like, I think they had like 8 games in 2 weeks. It was ridiculous. So the
Mm.
recovery is such an important part of that,
Well,
right?
I mean, you look
And
at April, it's gonna be the same thing, or April or May. I think they've got like 8 games in 32 days or something stupid like
yeah,
that.
and we also had like recurring problems, and that's where something really stands out, right? Like, yes, you can make fun of Lassi Lapailainen's availability, Jules Anthony Valsena always being injured as well, but at some point, like, there has to be maybe different approaches to it, and maybe that's what they're looking for, right? Like maybe more into a physical therapist that knows, physical trainer that knows more advanced in different methods or whatnot. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating here, but it's a there must be a really good reason that they're taking their time looking for it,
I
right?
sure hope so.
Speaking of injury, the U.S. national team reported that our new signing, Jalen Neal, left their camp to join CF Montreal in Orlando due to an injury. We still have no update as the gravity of this injury. Elias, is this something that the fans should be concerned about, or is this a position where we can afford to have injuries for now?
Well, I mean, at no point do you want to, any player to be injured. At the same time, this is a relatively low level camp, quote unquote low level camp.
Yeah.
Not many European players are there as well. So I think that when a player leaves a camp, it's not really telling that, oh, it's like a long-term injury. It's more just, okay, the camp was ending in a couple days anyway. Just go ahead early and get acclimatized with your new club. And I'm sure that, at that in and of itself, him leaving the camp is not necessarily super devastating or newsworthy, but it is, important to note because I guess we'll get more information when Courtois meets the media later this week. But for the time being, I think no need to overreact yet.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, we talked about in this pod even before we knew he was injured. We were like, I think we're in a place, knock on wood, because you never know what's gonna happen in the next few months. But we're in a place where we can, see that, like, give him time, give him, the proper time to adapt to the culture, the traveling, the club, it's their teammates before we even talk about him getting some minutes, right? So maybe it's a real bad injury, maybe it's not, but in the meantime, I think we can all just
It's being described as a minor issue,
yeah.
so hopefully it stays that way and he's able to join full training soon. But
How
we'll
many
get
times
more
have you heard
information when we get more information.
how many times have you heard minor injury?
No, the problem is when a minor injury doesn't stop being a minor injury. That's the problem. A minor injury happens all the time. It's when it doesn't want to go away or it keeps coming back that it's technically a minor injury, but it's not,
Are you
That's
talking about Leslie Lapalainen?
talking about like 45 different people at this club over the course of the last like 5 years. So you know what? No shots at anyone directly.
All right, got you. So, Elias, it's become a tradition, a weekly tradition, as tradition would have it. CF Montreal waited until our podcast was done
Yeah.
to announce a new signing, Prince Owosu. We did talk about the rumor last week. A forward that last played for the team that should not be mentioned in this podcast, where he had modest success. What do you make of this signing?
My eyebrow was raised a bit, and I will have to wait until the MLSPA drops their player salaries to see just how much of a pay cut. Because if they're paying him the full TAM, what was it? He wanted 800,000.
Yeah,
Definitely raise an eyebrow. But and I gave this a lot of thought. If you have a TAM player come off the bench in Montreal, it's considered a waste of money. Whereas anywhere else across the league, especially in competitive teams, you have multiple TAM players coming off the bench. Right? It's only surprising Montreal because the wage bill is so low. But at the end of the day, if you have a TAM player coming off the bench and it's a way to ensure that you're getting an optimal use out of him, then that's fine. Because I don't think, as of right now, within the depth chart, if Laurent Courtois keeps staying with one forward and two attacking midfielders behind him, that he's going to start over Vrioni. I think Vrioni is your designated player. I think he's going to at least get the benefit of that at the beginning. Form changes, everything changes. We'll see what happens. But you have a TAM player coming off the bench, and I'm okay with that. Right? Especially if he's got that energy and he's if you take a look at his advanced stats and his defensive actions and his ability to press the ball, you are getting, in terms of at least that kind of output, you're getting a replacement for Matias Kokaro. Because he presses like an animal. He wins the ball. He's physically more imposing than Matias Kokaro. And he's a better dribbler. right? Technically speaking, with the ball at his feet, he's more comfortable. So all those things considered, I don't hate it. I'd love to see how much they're paying for him. That'll maybe skew my opinion on the signing as a whole.
Yeah.
But again, we're kind of jumping to conclusions here because he did score against Montreal, and he did score against FC Saint Laurent. So he has, and he's used to scoring in Montreal. But I don't hate this at all.
Well, look, last year his base salary was 700,000, and guaranteed compensation was 807,500.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think he
he
wanted
came in.
a raise or something, and that
Yeah,
was one of the reasons the contract talks fell apart. But if they can get him for under 7, I think that's a win.
and is that like is the Vrioni thing? Is it based on his DP status that almost makes him over? Because when you describe that kind of defensive work from him, to me, it sounds like such a Laurent Courtois kind of guy. He said it last year in several, in almost all his press conferences after games. When he was asked about the forwards, the front three, he'd always mention my front three are my first defense. My front three are my front
Mhm.
defense. So if he's getting a defensive forward, and he actually, when I heard Prince's a press conference, he said, "I take defense very seriously."
Yeah.
I mean, who isn't going to say that? But there's actually a lot of forwards that just say, like, oh well, yeah, I'll play defense if I have to, like if I'm asked to. But he said, I take this very seriously. So with that said, like, because the little I saw from Brioni is he likes to score, he likes to shoot, but is he as defensive as Prince Owusu is as a forward? Would that kind of attribute of being the defensive forward make him a better player fit for Laurent Courtois' scheme, in your opinion?
Not necessarily, because you look at who you're trying to replace in Joseph Martinez, and forget offensive output because neither of them had the offensive output of Martinez. And if they do match his offensive output, that's a win. Purely from a play style point, Matias Kokoro was a much more defensively involved forward than Joseph Martinez was because of fitness, because of age, because of a number of different factors. He was leading the press, he was pressing sometimes too much, right? Not only the players, but Laurent Courtois was also asking him to step back because if you
Yeah,
press as one man against an entire back line, congratulations, you've wasted energy and time, and also it's just free passing a free player.
it just discombobulates everything.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
presses only work if everybody presses at the same time and in the same idea. If he's just going, I'm running, and then no one else is running, then you're losing a player to the press, and they've
yeah.
passed already one player. They have 9 to go. So that in and of itself should not be the defining characteristic. Giacomo Vrioni is a more efficient finisher. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at what Laurent Courtois asked of his strikers for the most part of the season, I mean, when you got to the end of the season when they're clicking and they were scoring 3 or 4 goals a game, maybe he took a step back in attack and said, you know what, you guys are in form. I'll let you do your thing. Just tailored it maybe to the opponent, but didn't really press it much. But at the beginning of the season, when scoring was coming at a premium, he was asking and egging his strikers on to do this, 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 and this. And a lot of the stuff is very straightforward. It's very poacher behavior. Now, Prince Owusu does fill that kind of category as well. He can do that. He has the pace for it. He has the physicality for it, and he has the the directness that you want. But when it comes to finally getting into the penalty area, that's where Veroni has the upper hand. And so when you're looking to break down low blocks, when you're looking to um, have that person that could just snatch at a ball and kind of finish seemingly out of nowhere, maybe on a half chance, that I'm picking Veroni over Owusu right now.
Okay.
Now, again, form could tell different things, and what the rest of the team. There's a number of different factors between now and the beginning of the season, but as of now, I think Vrioni has the head start.
I don't know why I'm seeing it like we're gonna be seeing a lot of two striker form, a lot of two striker.
He kind of danced. I asked him that question
Yeah,
about a change of formation,
he
and he
was
kind of danced
non-committed.
around it. He
Yeah,
danced around it, and he kind of just avoided, and then he was like, "Okay, next question." So I'm sure we'll see a bit of everything. I'm sure
those
we'll
are
see
two
different formations.
starters.
Those are two players who are capable of starting. Those are not two like players that are 100% starters no matter what.
Underwhelming starters for the previous teams.
I just think they are technically MLS starters, right? But it's not like first name of the team sheet, you got to go, right?
Yeah.
So it'll also depend on the performance of the 10s. It also depends on the performance and how well they perform in preseason, because we're definitely going to see different shapes and different formations in preseason. Whether or not they work remains to be seen. But I don't think, at least at the beginning, we're going to get too much of a shift.
Yeah. They got if it doesn't if it's not broken, don't fix it, right?
Yeah,
I think you did
it's probably situationally specific, which is true. If they're down, they go 2 strikers. For the start of the game, just 1. It's very likely. And also having someone like Prince Owusu coming on to close the game out when you're leading, that's not a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
Whereas
Huge
the other way
settle.
around, Vrioni on as a sub, when you're leading, I mean, yeah, he helps in set pieces, maybe because he's like 6'3", but in terms of defensive actions, maybe not as much.
This is what I guess we kind of like when they first signed Joseph Martinez and Matias Kokaro. It was with that intention, kind of what like LP Habs fan is mentioning, right? Like situation wise, the luxury of having someone like Matias Kokaro and Joseph Martinez, two individually talented strikers, right? That could give you scoring opportunities even when you're losing, right? But it just didn't pan out. It was I saw them playing. You probably saw them too. Everybody saw them playing sometimes both of them together, and it was not a pretty picture. They did not play well together. They are very individually talented. So we'll see how Joseph does in San Jose, because he's got a. It looks. I don't know how that's gonna work with that
That attack
power.
looks really good though.
Oof, man, that's it's something that's gonna
definitely
be
going to be more interesting than they were last year.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so we that was an interesting first week. I wish we could say more, but just it's very much. It feels like like the first week of school where everybody's all the teachers are giving you their outlines of the courses and
Yeah,
will
it's syllabus
the just warming up to the storm that's
Yeah.
coming up. And like it's just a nice get to meet, and we still have an incomplete squad, right? So it's hard to really put all your ideas into one, right? So this week we had our first press conference. We're going to move on to our next things. This week we had our first press conference with Laurent Courtois, Fabien Herber, Joel Waterman, Samuel Piet, and Prince Owusu.
Yep.
Of all the press conferences that you heard, Elias, what are some points that you got out of all of them? Some points in general that you heard.
My biggest point, and I talked about this earlier, is Ousmane Jabang, and I tweeted this out almost immediately after the press conference because it was definitely significant. Samuel Piet, who again he likes to praise people when they've earned it, but he took a significant amount of time. Because I asked him about Biello and Jabang together, right? Because they're two players that are in somewhat similar situations, loan spell regardless. And he kind of said, yeah, Alessandro's getting there. He's developing. He'll be all right. And then he went for like a minute and a half talking about what he liked about Ousmane Jabang and what was different from, when he left for Vegas versus when he came back. And it's the confidence. And these are situations where if he does end up getting significant minutes, and we do see that next step where he takes from being a fringe player to a reliable rotation player to even getting some starts, this is one of those situations, kind of like Jonathan Sirois, that is good for Montreal as a whole, because when they send people out on loan, it has more validity, right? The same thing with Grayson Duty, who again maybe hadn't have as successful a loan spell, but still had a good loan spell, right? He still started almost every game, and he played a ton of minutes in Vegas. So when you take a look at how much your captain is singing your praises, and he's taking specific time on his press conference and going on and on and on and on, you take that at face value. And this is not only, I feel like, a massive co-signing of the steps Ousmane Jabang is taking, but when you have someone as versatile as him, who has played in the 6, who plays a central defender, who does that remind you of that is currently the starting central defender, right? So when I'm not comparing him to Joe Waterman right away because those are huge shoes to fill. That's the first sub on for the national team, right? That's the third choice center back right now for the men's national team. So that's a big ask. I'm not putting that on him.
Yeah.
But all the criteria to grow and develop from that point, and maybe start to step into that as the heir to Joe Waterman, kind of like how Joe Waterman was seen as the heir to Rudy Camacho, is there. So that lineage is there. But now the thing about confidence is you can't just be like, you're confident now when you come. Cool. Park it. No, you have to actually get those minutes to further that confidence and further development. So yeah, he was good on the ball for someone who played in the USL. But now you have to push to become someone who's good on the ball at the MLS level, or else you're stagnating.
100%, and I agree with you. Like his profile is, I watched him play a few times last year with Las Vegas, and he has a very interesting profile. He
Mm-hmm.
has the speed. He moves around really well. He doesn't get stuck on that. That was one of the most infuriating things of watching Joaquin Sosa play, was how he would get stuck on himself, right? So it's one of those things that he has a very interesting profile. He's very
Yeah,
technically able, and yeah, the shot of that, that moment that he dedicated, Samuel Piet dedicated out of his press conference, it's got to be ringing loud. I mean, how many times, any of our listeners or us, Elias, that you've been at a job, and you hear your manager praising to your colleagues, right? Or you hear one of your colleagues praising you, and you're like, oh, wow, that feels good. I like that. Somebody's been watching, and sometimes just that little somebody's been watching is enough to say, okay, if he's watching, if Samuel Piet is watching, the captain of this team is watching me and is observing my progress, then imagine what the coaches are saying, because that sounds
yeah.
that sounds loud. The same thing that he says in the press conferences might be the same thing that Samuel Piet saying in Laurent Courtois' office when they're briefing on how practice went, right? So um, I think he also advocated for him to have more playing time, right? He said the real experience is going to be him getting more game time. So definitely think he needs to get that this year and all that. So I think it was, CF Montreal bet on him big time this year. They signed him for, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 year and 2 years option this off season. I
That
forgot if it
sounds about
was.
right. I'm not 100% sure
Yeah,
that
but
sounds right.
they really bet on him to, like, let's do this. Let's, this is your year. So yeah, we're gonna see. Hopefully, I don't know if it's the Joel Waterman replacement, but definitely someone that hopefully can push this play. He's been in the club for a while too.
Yeah, I mean, he got drafted in 2023, so he spent
Yeah.
1 year doing nothing, then another year on loan. So
Yeah, so it's important. He needs this moment, if not here, somewhere else, but he needs to prove that he's MLS level, right? If not, unfortunately, he's gonna stay in the USL for a bit, or maybe jumping around teams. So definitely wants to should be settling himself in the squad. So based on what Laurent Courtois said this week, how do you think he's feeling about the new signings the team has made, where he's supposedly been involved to an extent, as opposed to last year, where he was kind of handed the players? Again,
yeah,
we talked about the date that he came in was kind of late. There were a lot of signings that were either already on their way or done, and not really selected by him, or really knowing much about what he prefers to like. Well, we don't know what the internal conversations were like, right? But didn't seem like he knew. But this year, both the president, Gabriel Gervais, and Laurent Courtois have said, yes, Laurent Courtois has been involved in these conversations with players and staff. So how how do you think he's feeling about this year in general?
it's tough to say right now because he's only got half the new signings, right? He's got the Germans, and that's it, right? Neil and Junior getting there now. Um, but based on what Harbers and Owusu said, they seem to have been selling quite well. Again, that's the whole, maybe the silver lining of this training camp where you're away from home, is you are forced to spend time with your teammates, and you kind of grow off the field. So I mean, last year you saw it. They were doing, what was it, like judo or jujitsu
Yeah.
in the courtyard, right? You
Yes.
haven't seen that yet, but
It's coming. It's coming.
it's quality time spent, because at the end of the day, you're
Sure.
not just coworkers, you're teammates, and there's a different environment because now I'm relying on you. If you're coworkers, you work independently. You can work independently and not affect each other, and it's whatever. But when you're teammates, you need that kind of bond, and you need that kind of rapport, that once you get on the field, I feel comfortable in your presence. And we saw it when they had their long road trip last season when things were going poorly. They took that long road trip, and then things got briefly better. They spend more time together. Yes, the go-karting. Talk about the go-karting again. Jesus Christ. But again, things get better. So it's that kind of goes to show how important this is. And so that's why I'm excited for Neil and Verona to get there as soon as possible, because they also need to be integrated into this group.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jalen Neal spending time with George Campbell and Caden Clark at the national team camp helps, because at least he has Montreal players, and I'm sure he's familiar with a lot of the other American people, a lot of the other
And
American
Matko.
players. Matko Milovic was there, actually picked up an assist but missed the penalty. So you know what? Classic
And a
Matko
goal. And a goal.
all over the place. He scored too. It's all over the place with this guy. But there's also people like Bryce Duke and other Americans in the team that you have this rapport with, and that you are aware of, and that makes things easier. So I'm just looking forward to them to actually getting some minutes in together on the pitch, and even more minutes just at the dinner table or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you mentioned is kind of underrated, right? What the conversations that one is having in practice, it could be maybe while they're having a water break. It's like, hey, man, so what do you think of Montreal? What do you think of Laurent? Right? What do you think of our coach? Like, what are your opinions? It could be just a quick talk, right? And again, we talk about in the office. I like to compare things to the office, right? How we as human beings deal with each other, and in the office we call it the water cooler talk, right? Where we're kind of just talking about what's going on and all that, and it's probably important to that message is being transmitted. I mean, especially the kind of impact that Laurent Courtois had for Caden Clark's progress, right? Last year was massive. We saw him go back to himself and be impactful in the team, and he's such an ambassador for that kind of for CF Montreal and Laurent Courtois as a coach, in order to welcome someone like Jalen Neal and all that, to so it did feel like they did ask him if there was a lot, some added pressure this year around, because it's his second year. He's already got 1 year, and he's gone through a lot last year. It feels like what he went through last year feels like 2 seasons or 3 seasons in another team, but it was insanity, everything that he went through last year.
Kind of thrown to the deep end with no floaties, right?
Dude, think about that, man. The
Yeah.
franchise player requests a trade. The sporting director is fired. I mean,
Leaves.
we're not gonna go back to episode 150 there, but but seriously, like, just
Yeah.
what he went through last year, as this year it's his guys, his players, and all that, right? So he was asked, do you feel pressure? And also Gabriel Gervais was asked the week before, does Laurent Courtois have more pressure to perform?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty straightforward. Yeah,
Yeah.
there
But
is
like, as
pressure
he
this
should,
year.
though, right? As
Yeah.
he should. I shouldn't ask you to just kind of barely make the playoffs again. No, I want you to comfortably make the playoffs again. I want you to win the Canadian Championship, because right now you are the best team in Canada, and based on pure form and just current the way things are. We talked about this last week. There's no excuse not to, at the very least, make the final of the Canadian Championship. You should be getting by Toronto. I don't want to see any of this more losing to CPL teams, because even if the Canadian Premier League is getting better, which it is, you should not be losing to Canadian Premier League teams, especially over two legs.
Yeah. God.
And getting to the final is one thing, but you actually have to show some follow through now, right? You've had some big players show up in big games. This is a big game for a title. I expect you to win that as well. And he's 100% in the right. He's not asking too much. It's not like he's asking to go win. And that's what Samuel Piet said too, actually, in his media availability. It's not they're asking us to go out there and win MLS Cup off the rip and win the support shield. No, this is more than attainable, and it's a more than fair to ask, based on the current progression of the club, for them to comfortably make the playoffs. I'm talking about like at least fifth or sixth, and on top of that, win the Canadian Championship. That's well within their capabilities.
Yeah. And it's Laurent Courtois also got players that, in a sense, I think Gabriel Gervais mentioned it last week, or Fabien and Prince both have a chip on their shoulder, right, to prove that they can do it, because it didn't go well in their club. I mean, Fabien Albert was there for 6 years in Chicago, and they just kind of never exercised his option, right?
Yeah.
So it looks like they're coming into this club, like hungry to prove to prove the doubters wrong, right? To prove their previous club wrong. And I think that's important. That's important to because it is, how many players that have a chip on their shoulder have been um have performed. But it I think in my mind I still have a lot of questions as to you know how do these new players perceive the whole, we're going away for seven games, we're going to be traveling a lot, and we don't I don't how many nights did they stay at their hotel in Montreal? Maybe like a few hours before they had to go back to Orlando. They had to go to Orlando, right? So it's a lot of moving pieces, and I wonder if that kind of traveling and all that becomes a disadvantage, even, and maybe Laurent Courtois, seeing as he's now sitting at that table where you're recruiting staff and players alike, if that kind of becomes an obstacle for them to start signing, say, big names, or maybe not that big names but potential, that just are like, yeah, I'm not really down to travel for 7 weeks. I'd rather be somewhere warmer, or somewhere where I can like spend time with family, because Fabien Herbert and I believe Prince also have family. I think they need to settle in as well, right? So um what to what extent is this affecting Montreal, like the whole, I know we're kind of touching on another topic when the schedule came out there, but do you think this impacts their
From a weather perspective, I mean, you got a player from Montreal and a player from Chicago. I don't think the weather's too jarring for them.
Toronto?
I mean, I'm not too concerned about that. I like your point about having a chip on their shoulder, because I feel like people say chip on the shoulder with like a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I don't see it as that. Everyone's got a chip on their shoulders. What you do with it, that's like makes it negative or positive. And all four players, when you think about it, have a chip on their shoulder, right? Jalen Neal was starting for the best team in MLS, and he got benched in the last third of the season.
Yeah.
Right? He was unused, just an unused sub for like 90% of those closing games and the playoffs. Take a look at Giacomo Vrioni, who, let's be frank, right there, they got him for 50,000. They got him for a cripple, right? In terms of transfer fee, and New York is actively paying part of his salary.
Yeah.
Right? Do you like, as a player, like, it's, I'm paying you to play against me. That's how little I want you. Right? So they all have chips on their shoulders. They all have something to prove. And again, that brings in good competition, because these players are all hungry. Well, I'm assuming these players are all hungry, and they all have something to prove, which means all these players that may have gotten a little bit complacent or a little bit too comfortable and it affected their play, well, now you got to wake up. And so, look, I think that these four signings are steps in the right direction, both for the depth and your starting 11. But that can't be it, right? I can't be looking at this squad going, that's it. No.
Yeah.
There's still spots where I think they need reinforcement. And we're not even talking about left back because there's only one. I'm saying generally you need more quality in there.
Yeah. And I think at the same time, it's something that Corey Ray, I want to say Corey Ray because it seems like he's the one leading the way in the MLS, at least in the intra-league trades. But it looks like something that he's been working on beyond finding cheaper players is that CF Montreal has taken an approach where they're monitoring situations, like getting players that have been benched, that maybe teams are desperate to leave. Like, they're monitoring situations instead of just looking like, hey, this guy's willing to come here for a crepo, or this guy is willing to come here for this amount of money. Oh, but he hasn't scored in 50 games. Yeah, but he's cheap and he's worth it. So they're really monitoring situations where they're seeing what player still believes that they're worth more. They just need a second chance. What player wants that like what they did with Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, right, from TFC. He said, I came specifically because I wasn't getting
Clark.
Yeah, I wasn't getting the minutes I wanted. These are situations that they're monitoring where they're focusing not on the money necessarily, but on the situation. Like, does this player want out? Do they want a second chance? Do they want more minutes to prove themselves? Do they have the potential? Yes. So I think that, like you said, the four players and even the ones that they signed during the summer, that performed tremendously, were are situations, right? And I don't know if we can say the same thing about previous signings, like last offseason with Dominic Yankov or Matias Kokara, Joseph Martinez, if they were those kind of players. I think Joseph Martinez did kind of come with a chip in his shoulder where he wanted to prove that he couldn't he
He
could
still got
perform
it.
still, even though he got injured and missed, still managed to score so many goals. But yeah, absolutely, I think it's definitely something to look at, and they're probably looking at another physical trainer looking to prove himself in the league, right? The situation,
Yeah,
and
I don't know.
for
Maybe about
another
coaching staff, that's the same thing. But I mean,
for
hey,
for another couple.
if they deliver, then I'll take them.
That's it.
If they
Um,
deliver, then you say yes without thinking.
That's it. So both Piet and Courtois separately mentioned that the new strikers brought a different dimension to Courtois' playing style, something that Joseph Martinez and Matias Kokaro couldn't. I know we touched on this a little bit. What do you make of that, of them specifically? Because again, Samuel Piet took some time, really. I don't
Yeah,
think he attacked Joseph Martinez. I don't want to use that word, but he did say, like, as much as Joseph Martinez did really good things, like, I think people forget what everybody around him did to make it possible. You
yeah, and
know, and
also what he did when it wasn't going so well.
yeah, exactly. And so he was really quick to point that out. Like, Joseph Martinez, and Laurent Courtois also said, Joseph Martinez was extremely talented, but these players that we brought in do something else that adds to the game that is important to me, to Laurent Courtois, right? So what do you make of that those comments?
I mean, they're not incorrect, right?
Yeah.
Giacomo Vrioni and Prince Owusu are definitely better at holding up, playing with their back to goal, playing with a defender right behind them, putting pressure. So I'm not necessarily saying that they're better at. Well, they're definitely not better at dropping into the midfield and playing with people like Caden Clark and Bryce Duke. But what they can do is that they can now stretch the defense more to give Duke and Clark more space to play. Now, both those are viable tactical options because either you outnumber them or you give them more space. That's a personal philosophical choice that Laurent Courtois is making. The problem now is, can it be reliably executed? Because yes, these players can and do have the ability to provide hold up play, but these are not necessarily specialists in that, right? If you look at the way that they're deployed in their respective teams, right? Prince Owusu is someone that is not necessarily meant to hold up play. Again, that's because TFC just didn't play that way, but he was more get in the box, get into a dangerous area, and we'll find you. Same thing with Rioni, who's just a pure poacher. He's just capital P poacher, right? That is his bread and butter. So they do have the characteristics in terms of their size, in terms of the quality of their first touch that they could play it. But the thing is, I haven't seen, again, I've seen more TFC than I've seen Revolutions, but that's not what jumps out when you look at their profiles and you look at what they do best. So there may still be a learning curve for them based on what's immediately asked of them, but the quality and the ability is definitely there. It's just maybe the repetition and the muscle memory isn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's a new scheme. It's a new, but you know what? With the kind of deals that they got, Elias, both of them, it really seems like they're telling them,
It's
like,
hard to say no.
but more for the player, like the player, like, because Vrioni only is for 1 year, and then we'll see
Yeah,
what happens
yeah, we
from
talked
there.
about last week, right? There's
And
no risk.
there's no risk, but also, like, the players are very conscious. Like, it's a learning curve, like you said, Elias, but that learning curve has to come by quick, has to pass by quick. So, um, look, we saw last year, and I do want to point out something that Roberto said. He said everybody seems happy so far. You're right. Everybody does seem happy so
Say
far.
magic word is so far.
That's it. Because last year, if you look at this time of the year, at the Victor Wanyama interview that he gave, not I think it was a press conference that he gave. He was like, "Oh man, I love it here. Like, everything's great. Laurent Courtois brought everything back and happiness." And then at the end of the year, he goes to Tony Marinero's show and
Yeah,
says that
what
everything
happened? What
sucks.
happened? Right?
Yeah, so everybody's happy right now. Everything's fine and dandy. Everybody's high fiving each other at the beginning of practice. There's nothing much to be said. But at the end of the day, it's really what's gonna happen once the sorry to say, but once the shit hits the fan, right? Because it is gonna happen. It's inevitable. It happens. It happened with the LA Galaxy. It happens with every team. It's really testing times where you have to be bigger and you have to try to like overcome that as a person, right? So I think we all found out. I think the team found out who each player was, um, as the time went on and the times got tougher, they got there was fatigue in the legs and there was fatigue and everything. And that's something. Hopefully, maybe Laurent Courtois will approach this training camp differently to test those bad times, not just do jiu-jitsu, and maybe that's not really the building exercise we want to do. But yeah, it's been, I want to say, almost an uneventful week, because we only had one signing. But Elias, you know what? I'll bet you 50 crepos that a crepo,
50
sorry,
crepos.
a crepo
You
that
got that kind of money?
improving solace. But no, like what I'll do, what I want to say is, I can bet you that there's gonna be a deal done this week.
Well, look, I mean, their first preseason game is Friday, I believe, against FC Cincinnati. They've got 3 more in February, that haven't been announced yet. But hopefully, we do get some kind of visual, some kind of idea of how they played, and how well they played, but also how they played.
Mhm.
Because I don't want to just look at a box score. It's gonna piss me off. But knowing this club, that may be all we get.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think that I agree with you. I think that this is not the final squad. I definitely think there's going to be 1 or 2 people brought in, maybe 1 or 2 people leaving as well, because there's just a lot of forwards right now. There's too many chefs in one kitchen. So I think that we could definitely see people leave either on loan or get transferred. It's entirely possible. We still don't really have a definitive um piece of closure on the Nathan Saliba thing. We'll see next week on the media availabilities. If he's still not included, then you're like, where's Nathan Saliba? But I think that ultimately, again, in honor of Hattie, we wait and see, because
yeah.
we're not going to throw shit at the fan and throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. We're not going to
Yeah,
speculate wildly here. We will give the information when it is available to us.
I don't know. I think that there's I definitely don't think Yankov and Opoku are staying this season. I have a hunch that
Both
they
of
are
them,
very both of them,
or like they're
both
both
of them.
gone.
What does, based on what you know, Elias? Let's be honest. What do you think Yankov does? Yankov show you like the kind of player that wants to prove something, that wants to be the next? Has he shown you that? I mean, I'm not doubting his talent, because I think he's an excellent, a very talented player. But when he's on the field, besides the goals that he scored, which I think he scored like 3 or maybe 2, has he shown that motivation to want to be that playmaker, that attacking forward, that is a game changer, like Caden Clark was, or Bryce Duke? Has he shown consistent performances? That has he shown improvement at all? I know there was a
Has he
lot of.
shown to the ability to be a game breaker? Yes, I believe, because that's the thing. When he was fit at the beginning of the season, his execution was arguably the best in the team in terms of just delivering the final ball, or finishing, or making the right plays, right? Physically, he was not impressive, but his execution was excellent. The thing is, now you also have to, I feel like context is important here, because you also have to remember the state he came in from Ludogorets. He was training on his own. He was a part of the team in name only. He wasn't traveling with the team. He was never part of the matchday squad. He wasn't even training with the group. So he came here basically as if he was training the offseason. He did not come in midseason form like what was expected from someone coming from Europe. He then immediately gets injured, comes back, does all right, gets injured again, and then coming off of, what's a disappointing end to your time at Ludogorets, then coming here, getting injured, and frankly, he hasn't played in North America in years, right? So he's just not used to the amount of traveling. Montreal, Toronto is like one side of the country to the other when you play Ludogorets.
Yeah.
So let alone going all the way down to the south. So that's why I believe that you are given a year of leeway when you are a European transfer into MLS. Any really any foreign transfer into the US, into MLS. Sorry, because of the fact that it is so different. Just to live as a professional footballer. Forget the style of play. Forget the surfaces. Forget the 101 other things that are thrown your way. Just living off the pitch as a footballer in MLS is completely different. So this year, there is no more, there's no more leeway. Like, it's either perform or thank you for your service, good luck. But I wouldn't go so far as to say he's got to go. And Mahala, I love Mahala. I can't lie to you. I love
He's
Mahala.
talented. I'm not.
I love Mahala because the thing is, there's no one on the team that does that can play like him. Right? He's arguably the best one-on-one dribbler. He's arguably the best. Well, he's the only left-footed player in attack, I believe. And so, I don't know if Frioni or Usu are lefties, actually. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
They're lefties.
But
Both lefties. They're both
they're both lefties?
Yeah, they're both lefties.
Well, I mean, that kind of also fills a need because, again, before that, Mahala was the only left-footed attacker on the team. So I think that he brings this unique profile that can definitely be helpful in certain situations. The problem is he has so much promise that I hate relegating him to a kind of Bryce Duke type role where in the right scenario, if you've got him in the right setting against the right team and this, then all these constraints around him being good. But that's all we've gotten so far when we've seen him play is he does really well in the right scenario. And in the wrong scenario, he kind of fades. Yeah. So I think having him as a right-sided option on his left foot is important and can be helpful, especially with someone overlapping like Jahkeele Marsh-Rudy. But it's got to be more consistent. I think that's the biggest thing about him is the consistency.
Yeah, and also like
he came from LAFC, right? This is not someone new to MLS.
Yeah, but when we talk about like situations, right? Like Dominik Jankov was given his opportunities. Yes, you're right. All those factors that you mentioned are correct. It was kind of a weird story for him, but this is the difference with the recruiting they're doing now because we talked about them having chips on their shoulder, the new players coming in. Dominik Jankov, if he would have had that chip on his shoulder, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I believe that he would have also, the same way we see Fabian Erber or Prince Owosu, is they have that chip on their shoulder, so they're like, okay, well, I can't mess up, and I already have MLS experience. I have no year to adapt. I'm adapted. So that weight is that's no longer, that excuse is no longer in the table. As opposed to Dominik Jankov, you have 7-10 different excuses that excuse his performance or whatever. But at the end of the day, at some point it's up to also the player to adapt quickly. And he had his chances. He had maybe 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. Those are the moments you got to capitalize. You guys, I deserve more minutes than this. But he was given minutes, and he was given minutes several times. And again, like you said, it almost felt like for him it had to be a perfect situation, because I did see some plays as I was rewatching the games where I was just like infuriated by almost like the same kind of frustration that Bryce Duke gives you sometimes when you see him play, where he just gets bodied out. And he's a big kid. He's not small. He's a big kid, but he would get bodied out. And
he's not that tall.
Not about tall, but you can tell he's
got more meat on it. He's got more muscle on him than Bryce.
He should definitely not be getting bullied by some of these midfielders that he was getting bullied by. And it was just one of those things that I was just like, okay, what's going on here? There's something more to it, because he clearly has no confidence in his own body to be able to body people out. And I think the MLS is a very physical league that also that requires you to be physical and also capitalize on chances. But yeah, I mean, I don't see him, if he stays with the squad, maybe till summer, and hopefully maybe they'll I don't know if they're going to use the new function, which I didn't put to talk about in this show, but definitely something, a new rule that came up. Elias, that Tom Bogert broke the news about the new mechanism that they had, that the MLS is adding about buying out.
There's always a new mechanism.
Contracts.
There's always.
I mean, I can't break
down
just
because MLS trades are too simple and they're too straightforward and they're too easy to understand. So they need to add another more complicated thing.
Yeah, man, it gives people jobs.
It gives therapists jobs.
Yeah,
Jesus.
But yeah, I mean,
management.
So and Mahalo Pokemon, like the few moments of brilliance to me has been really when I've seen him be one-on-one, and I don't think this team sees him in that position. He went one-on-one. Mahalo Poke was deadly, man. He moves really well, technically and he can beat out defenders, and he scored some beauties with that. But beyond that, man, like sometimes his passing was infuriating. Why, the way he would pass the ball, or he just his build-up play skill was not good. And again, I just think it's a scheme thing. He's in the wrong scheme, but he's a very talented player. Don't see him getting past this winter, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll prove
We
me
will
wrong,
wait
and
and see.
we'll look back at this podcast and say, Andy, you were so wrong.
I'll be half saying, does anyone know what position he plays? I'm assuming this is about Yankov because he doesn't look comfortable anywhere, and that's true because he really is like an attacking minded kind of 8, and Montreal just doesn't have that.
Yeah, he only
So
wants to attack.
I get where he felt a little bit uncomfortable because he doesn't have maybe the pace. Oh, Opoku. Apoku's a right winger, man. That's any way you cut it. Opoku is someone who's comfortable on his off-footed wing, so he can cut inside. He can take people on one-on-one. The thing is, there's no position for that at the team.
He's either going to be a attacking midfielder or a striker here in this scheme.
And that's one thing I thought about is that if they do go with 2 strikers and a 10 behind them, having someone like Mahala in behind a bigger striker, a target man, could be interesting. But again, it comes back to my point. In the right position, given the right circumstances and everything going in Mahala's favor, he could be good. No. Mahala, you're good, but you have to be good.
Yeah. You have the talent, right? You have the skills, you
so
have the tools.
There's too many constraints being put on him to ensure this performance that if all these things have to be, if the planets have to be aligned in the right way and the weather has to be right, if all these things need to be met for you to have a good game, then you cannot be relied upon. And that was my biggest complaint with Bryce Duke before the end of the season was he cannot be relied upon consistently. He had good games, but in the right setting. That's not how this works.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how starters get starting jobs. That's how subs become super subs.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that Bryce Duke actually ended up as much as we gave him shit. I was the first one to complain about him. He proved that he had a lot of flexibility position wise in the game, which was important. If LP Habs fan at this point of the year, 2025, after we obtained them, I think summer 2023, is asking what position does he play in, we are in big trouble. Because at this point, with the amount of games we've seen him play, yes, he was injured at the beginning of 2024, but we've seen him play minutes. We've seen him play games. What position is he comfortable in? He's absolutely right, Elias, because I don't know what I can't define him as a striker. I can't define him as a winger. I can't define him as a attacking midfielder. He always looks like
his natural position is a winger. The thing is, Montreal hasn't used a winger since like Rémi Garde. Yeah. So you can't. It's a difficult system to be in when your main position just doesn't exist. Yeah. It's not a thing in this club. So
yeah. Well, look, that closes this topic for the week night, and of course next Sunday we'll talk about the signing that they will do tomorrow, because they always do that to us, right? So let's move on. We're going to move on to our last topic of the day. So Canada women's national team has hired their new coach, Casey Stone. Elias, what were your first thoughts when you saw her hiring?
My first thought was another Brit. No, that was not my first thought.
Damn it!
The damn British again. No, my first thought was this is someone who understands what a project is. It's someone who took Manchester United from the second division and got them promoted. This was the first ever coach of the San Diego Wave. This is someone who understands how to build something from the ground up. The thing is, the women's national team does not need to be built from the ground up. Maybe the attack does, but as a whole, as a unit, they do not need to be built from the ground up. So now it's more in the evolution phase, right? How can you now evolve into not just one of the best teams, but like consistently a top 5 team in the world? Because they have the people for it to consistently compete with the Americans, with the Spanish, with the French. They beat the French, they beat the Americans before. They drew the Spanish, but that was a weird friendly.
That was weird, yeah.
That was a weird game. Anyway, right? But so the thing is, the one thing standing in the way from them reaching that, they're top 10 now, but reaching top 5 consistently and without debate, top 5, is reliable and threatening attack. They have the players, they have threatening attackers, they have great attackers. But the thing is, they're never deployed in a way that makes me think, I don't care who they go up against, they will be dangerous. In the same way that I look at the defense and I go, no matter who you send at this back line, I'm comfortable. Yeah, they'll lose games. Yeah, they'll win games. But this back line, I put it up against any back line in the world, and I'm not shy.
Yeah.
I put them against France. I put them against Spain. I put them against Germany. I think they're better than the American back line. And so that's not the problem. The midfield is the same thing. Jesse Fleming, Simi Wujo, Quinn, Julie Gross. These are all players that can complete at the highest level and have competed at the highest level. The attack is weird because you have world-class attackers. You have attackers currently in England and lighting it up. And they're either not getting the time of day, not being used correctly, or both. And so now I'm saying this is fresh blood, and I'm seeing this very similarly to the way I'm seeing
Jesse March.
Thank you, Jesse Marsh. Jesus Christ, my brain.
I'm in your head, Elias.
The same way I'm seeing Jesse Marsh, where this is a breath of fresh air, where this is a chance for them to shake up the status quo, not necessarily in a formation sense, because I do think that this 3-back is the best way to get what you get the best out of the national team, but in a philosophical sense, where this is how we're going to be attacking now. This is how we're going to be deploying our players, because you have someone like Olivia Smith, who is one of the most informed attackers in the WSL, and she barely gets the time of day with the national team. It makes no sense. And that was due in large part to the fact that when Beth Priestman was coach, she had her players in the same way that John Herdman had his players. No matter what, no matter the form of other people, these are my guys. When the interim staff is there, they don't want to rock the boat too much. They want to get results, but kind of like what Morbiolo did, they don't want to rock the boat too much and completely change everything when they know that they may be there in an interim capacity. So they just kind of want to stay the course and stay consistent, which is what we got. That's what we saw with the national team with the attackers. It was the same thing. This is a new coach, hopefully going, because again, like we talked about a bit earlier in the show, we don't really get an idea of what her tactical ideas are with this team yet, but attacking sense, this feels like a breath of fresh air. Because San Diego, well, first of all, she got to work with some phenomenal attackers, including Alex Morgan when she was in San Diego. So this is one of, if not the greatest striker ever when you in the women's game, and period. Full stop. One of the greatest strikers, the most talented left-footed strikers ever. So this is now a coach who has the ability to kind of bring the best out of individuals in attack. I need it now to be incorporated into the collective.
Yeah, because it's messy up there. Yeah,
messy up top.
Yeah, and this actually brings up a good point, because in her press conference, she mentioned how the fact that there were no important tournaments this year. There are tournaments, but they're not important. She said it herself. Was kind of a blessing in disguise. Her words, not
I
mine.
agree. I know, but I 100% agree.
The reason being is because it's going to give them time to work on regaining the trust of the players. Elias, do you think there's a way back for them to regain that from the players? Or is this the year where you kind of want to turn maybe the page on some of these players and kind of have, like you said, a fresh start, right? Like a fresh start where we can maybe get new bodies in here, some people that don't know that past culture, or should we just try to work with them? She did mention that in one of her interviews that in the past, she did work, I believe it was in Brazil, she said, where she was working with players that didn't trust coaches. These players in particular didn't trust their coaches, and she had to work on that. And so she has that experience, which it seems to be like when they interviewed, when they asked Kevin Blue, it seemed to be one of those things that they were focusing on is, what's your track record on your relationship with players? And she said, she told the players, I'm a player's coach. I'm about you. I'm here for you. Like kind of like what we kind of saw Andy spent, kind of pulling everybody together through rough times, right? What do you think that do you think they can do this? And how long do you think it would take if she needs to regain their trust of the squad?
It really depends on first impressions, I feel. I think it's such an important thing, especially when you're an international manager, when you don't see them every day and you don't see each other for months on end. But rather, I see you for 2 weeks and then I say goodbye to you for a bit. And then maybe I'll text you, maybe I'll show up to a game, but I'm not talking to you and interacting with you at 3 to 4 hours a day, every single day. So developing trust is so much more immediate, and the first impression I feel is so much more important. And yeah, like you said, right, the fact that the next major tournaments in like a year and a half is so important, is so helpful, because when Jesse Marsh came, Copa America was in like 2 months, 3 months, and yeah, they ended up having a phenomenal run, but the timing was still terrible, right? You did not want to have your new coach that you're going to take into the World Cup show up one window away from a massive international tournament. That was just terrible timing. It worked out, and everything is great now, and they're doing phenomenally, but purely from an optics perspective, that's not when you want your coach. A coach is what you want when you have almost no competitive pressure, because now she can sit down, take time, learn all the players, and grow that relationship without having to worry about sitting people or worrying about, I have deadlines because we have a tournament here, and if I don't do well in this tournament, I'm gonna get fired. No, you're chilling.
Yeah.
Right? You have one cup in like 2 weeks, but like you're playing, I wrote it down here actually, you're playing Philippines, North Ireland,
That's
Poland, the
what's up,
Republic of Ireland,
Philippines.
Scotland, and Wales. Right? This is a cup you should win.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? You get some wins on the board, you trust in different things. This is the perfect opportunity to do just that, which is develop some trust and get some smiles and just get some good vibes. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what Jesse Marsh got to do. And again, the Canadian national teams are really linked in their coach's journey. And again, they are linked in the fact that the best way forward, and again, the best way to change morale and build trust is to win as a unit. And this team always wins by committee. Anytime they've had success, yeah, I mean, Christine Sinclair is the greatest goal scorer of all time, but they would win these games by committee. And now when they win games, they win it by committee as well. So you keep doing that and you'll build trust. I'm not worried about that at all.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah. I mean, we talk about trust all the time. It's similar to like right a person that you see every 2 3 months, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to trust them again. I mean, that's the toughest challenge for any national team, be it men's side or women's side. Right? It's tough. It's tough to be a national coach. I mean, national coaches have complained to in the public about how little time they get with their players and the calendar's weird. Even club coaches have complained about the breaks that national players have, because they say, hey, those are like 2 weeks that I have off, that like I can't connect with my team. So it's really it's tricky. So I did also Casey Stone, and we talked a little bit about this. You touched on this. She identifies herself as a builder or even a rebuilder of a team.
Yeah.
How important was it to hire someone with that reputation? And Eliza, this is kind of a two-part question. How quickly do you think the players can forget the past? I didn't put the fans in the question because I don't think the fans will ever forget. But how quickly do you think the players can forget?
Immediately, because as bad as things ended with Bev Priestman, they still had a really impressive run in the Olympics, and they still managed to band together as a unit to kind of beat France and get on to the next round. So the players, I'm not too concerned by. And like you said, right, she's a builder or a rebuilder. When she got into United, they were in the second division, and she brought them into the WSL. She was the first ever coach of the San Diego Wave, so she was a builder. That is her brand. So what happens when you have an already established team with an already established, starting 7 or 8, is she approaches this with a much more critical eye, because when you have other managers that manage, top clubs, and they're more of a specialist in certain things, they go, I'm not here to bother status quo, I'm just here to perfect things. No. You're here to critically reevaluate, because when you look at how they played at the Women's World Cup, which is, again, and even at the Olympics in some parts, the attack is still the biggest issue. And we're harping on the attack because it really is the thing that's holding back from being top 5 team in the world. And so if she's approaching it from, okay, I have to rebuild the attack from scratch, this is what she does, right? She'll throw everything into the, and I think no ideas are out of bounds here. And I think that's what's the most impressive thing. And that's why I'm going to be watching this cup next month so closely, because I want to see different ideas. And for the last year, we've been begging them to try different things, and they just haven't. And if it's more of the same, I'm going to lose it. But this is the perfect opportunity with a new coach and different players that are in form right now. and NWSL is out of season. This is your chance to try new things with new attackers. Please, for the love of God, do it.
How heavy is it? Like, we talked about this before the show, but how heavy is it for Casey Stone to, like, she's probably excited, super motivated to get things started. She shows up to her first press conference, goes on some podcasts as well to do some interviews, and the questions, Elias, they're not, what formation are you going to play? What can you tell us a little bit about how what a coach likes to answer? What's your,
Yeah.
all they're asking, how'd you get here? How are you going to do it? How are you going to get rid of the past? How are you going to, fix this broken team, this broken organization? How heavy is that for her? Like, at some point, I can only assume that, and not just because it's her, it's any coach, I think, that is going into a rebuilding project or whatever it is, a project they hate it. It must get to them to answer these questions from the past. Like, dude, that has nothing to do with me. I'm here to fix things, right?
Yeah, I think it was to be expected for sure, because if Bev Priestman got fired because she underperformed and you're going in different directions, then she's not getting these questions. But it's the way it all happened, right? That's the thing. So I think once the next camp starts and once you start getting into the actual football, she'll be asked more football questions, because you've asked all your drama questions. You've asked all of it.
I've
Let it
already
go.
answered them.
Focus on the football now, right?
Yeah.
At the windows, during the camps, during the tournaments, focus on the football, because that's what she's here to do. And I think she's going to do great. I think she's the right person. I think that they brought someone with the right mentality and the right skill set. And I'm looking forward to. This is the most excited I've been for the national team in a while.
Hey, that's saying something. We did talk about, like, this upcoming year. There's not going to be much big competitions, but she did say in her press conference that her project is for 2 years.
Yep.
Elias, how long would you give her to start seeing changes in the team? I know you talked about a little bit in the next tournament. You want to see something different, right? But how long would you give her to start seeing changes in the team and maybe become serious contenders again? You mentioned about them being, like, repeated, like, top 5 or always ending in the finals, right? How long how patient are, say, the fans, how patient are you for this to start happening?
Immediately, at least the intention is the willingness, right? If they go to this cup here, a lot of these teams you could beat with your second or even third team when you look at the level, respectfully, right? You've got the likes of, like, Scotland and Wales and Ireland, who are very strong.
Mm-hmm.
But people like Philippines or Poland or Northern Ireland should be winning comfortably, which gives you the leeway to test things. I don't want you to just put out your strongest 11, win, and go like, see, I won. Yeah, you're going to win anyway. Like, I get it, you're a new coach and you kind of want to start on the right foot, but you also have to make a pact with the players to say that I'm willing to try new things, because I know that even though you are winning some games, you're not winning the ones that count. So something has to change. And the coach, as much as I like Beth Priestman and I had problems with certain things about Beth Priestman, she wasn't the reason, right? It was a global thing.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just her name is attached to it.
Exactly. The fault is not why they got knocked out of the World Cup, or why they didn't qualify for, or they didn't go further in the Olympics, is not just because of Beth Priestman. It's a global thing that needs to be addressed with the entire team and the entire philosophy. So I want her to kind of take that into account. And I hope that they communicated that with her, that, like, everything is not on you right away. If you lose this cup here, I forget what it's called, starts with the P, but if you lose this cup, you're fired. No, like, come on.
Yeah.
You give her the time and she will be able to experiment with that leeway.
Just a little side note, Elias. My father-in-law is Filipino, so go Philippines, man. Like, yeah, well, let's not forget about the Philippines. Just a little side note.
Not so bad.
Not again.
So bad.
Hey, man, I'm not doing it for me.
Just pray they don't match up in the cup, because then I will boot you.
I just don't want to sleep in the couch.
I will boot you.
All right, so
you're gonna sleep on the metaphorical couch of this podcast. You won't stop.
So. All right, look, I think we had one question that one of our just to finish the show here. We got a question
from Emil. Yes, Emil, what do we think of their player hires in NSL so far? They always have a mix of Quebecois from abroad, one French national team player, a bunch of Ligue 1 Quebec and university players. Is that similar to what we expected, what can we expect more? Also, Quinn to Vancouver, a big deal or a very big deal?
That's a big deal. Huge deal.
Huge
I think
deal.
I'll start with them. The fact
Yeah.
that they came to the new league, I think it's tremendous. I mean, they said that they wanted to come back home, and also for their own political reasons as well, that they want to kind of push the cause. So I think it's huge for the league. I think it's yeah, it's just it's giving I think a jump start to giving a name to the league, that there's such tremendously talented player coming to that league. So yeah, I completely say that it's a really really big deal, and hopefully that's something that they can maybe convince other players to come by
Oh,
to
absolutely.
come.
Absolutely. I think it's huge. And I wanted at least one or two national team players to be involved in this as players, not just as builders, because you're then also lending legitimacy to the league, and it's not just another league that will slowly gradually develop. It's like, no, they're serious, right? They're paying a higher minimum wage than a lot of leagues in the world already. They're serious about this, and if anything, if the PWHL's taught us anything, to build it and they will come, right? And you'd be surprised how many soccer fans will be turning up for this, because again, this is a serious league and they're taking it seriously, and it's got the right backing. That's the thing. That's the most important part, and they're willing to take their time with it, while also, right. It's not like, if we don't see profit in the next 2 years, we're shutting it down. No, they're serious about it right away, and they're also giving it the time it needs. That combination of two things is so important. And when you look at the kind of players, the joueurs d'ici, right? It's a very local, but there's also a lot of talent. And one player in particular that I found out about a while ago, but it's just announced now, because it wasn't official, it wasn't confirmed, it was like maybe happening, but was Stephanie Hill, who's one of the best U Sports players in the country,
Hmm.
who played for McGill. There's actually two players from McGill. I forget which the other one who was the captain, in fact. And again, the, Quebec U Sports specifically is so strong.
Yeah.
And again, this is furthering this pipeline of U Sports um, to professional football, which means that top Canadian talent has an alternative to NCAA, right? NCAA is still, you know, orders of magnitude ahead of U Sports. But what this does is now, from a more grassroots base, you have this opportunity to keep top level players in Canada. And you have the chance to keep them developed here and then play professionally here. And what that does is it advances your sport so much more than we could ever really know. Because for the longest time, even if you look at men's soccer, really up until maybe about what 5-10 years ago, if you weren't going internationally, then there was a cap on how far you could go in football, right? But now, if you are if you stay in Montreal, if you stay in Ontario, if you stay in British Columbia, no matter where you're staying, if you stay in Canada to develop your football, there is a path to professionalism, and that is the most important thing I think about this league. Is the fact that you're keeping top talent in Canada, and you're not forced to send them away to still have Canada be a top soccer country.
Yeah, and to respond to that question from the Rose FC, I think what something we have to keep in mind. Yes, I will say this: we always expect more, right? But it's I think one of the most important things is when you you read a lot about these players, and the reason they're coming to Roses FC is because they want to like kind of come back home. It's a comeback. A lot of them are coming back home, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's important because some of the people that are part of that organization today, which include the head coach Robert Rustoyo. I might be saying the name wrong. Antoine Goulner or Yannick Girard. These are Yannick Girard and Antoine Goulner both worked at the Montreal Impact Academy when it was getting built at the
Yeah.
very beginning. And one of the important things, because I did speak to them, one of the things that they told me when they were building this academy was um, that they understood how the Quebec people really connected to their players when they were local. And that's what made the academy so special, because it was local players, right? So
Yeah.
I think with their influence, with maybe their understanding, obviously they're probably not making these decisions, but they are sitting probably in that small round table for today, for now,
Yeah.
right? And they're giving their ideas, and yeah, like maybe is it a cheap home rebates? Maybe, I don't know, but a lot of them are coming back home, because who doesn't want to play from at home? Yes, maybe some of them were playing in Florida, which is a lot nicer. Take it from me, Florida's a lot nicer playing there and living there, but when you're far away from family, like I was, you miss it, and you'll do what you got to do, right? And you get an opportunity to get paid while you're here. It's a good feeling. So absolutely, yes. Like I said, do we expect more? I think as fans, we always expect more. We want only the best for these players, and you want them to be talented. But I think it's important that they find a way, especially that they're just starting out. They want to find a way to properly connect with the local Quebec people, as because it's one of their own, and yeah, I think that's a very sustainable way of growing a team, right? If you continue doing it, it's not just a one-time thing. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, one tiny little plug before we go.
Yes.
About Roses, for any prospective Roses fans, there is a meet and greet if you want to meet some of the players this Wednesday at the Burgundy Lion. So if you want to go, and again, I'm sure they'll have merch as well. But you go to their Twitter, you go to their Instagram, you go to their social media, you can sign up, and you can meet some of the players and the bonjours du site, which we love.
Yes,
And
I'll be there. Actually, I didn't know
always,
about that.
you will be
I'll
there.
be there. Yeah, I'll go.
Oh, yeah.
Why not? I love the Burgundy Lion.
I don't know. I gotta see how fat how I can get there from work. We'll see. I'll figure it.
Stop complaining. Anyways, thank you to everyone who joined us who joined us today. Thank you, Elias, for today. Fun show. We
Always.
hope you enjoyed tonight's show. As always, the podcast will always be free to listen and watch on all of our platforms. However, we've recently added some exclusive member content on our Patreon page, and we will continue adding some more this week. So don't forget to sign up and join and support the show and allow us to grow. A big shout out to all those who joined this week at the Patreon. We do see you. We see who you are, and then we do want to thank you for that. Thank you again to all of you who tuned in tonight, and see you next week for episode 212 of The Ball Is Round.